Welcome back. I'm your host, Collin Murphy, and I want to thank you for joining back into the college debate with the college Republicans and college Democrats of Salisbury University. We're now on to our next topic here, and this one almost as important, probably just as important as the last one, criminal justice reform. Thousands of Americans every day are incarcerated, and some may never get to see the light of day again. There's a lot of talk in the media about criticisms on both sides. So I'm going to give it to the college Republicans to introduce themselves and give their opening statements.
Hi, I'm Shea Collins.
Hi, I'm Collin Omealy.
And I'm Matt Wilson. The United States leads the world in prison rates with 655 per 100,000, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics report from 2018. The Bureau also reported that the United States prison population was about 2.2 million adults. According to the United States Census Bureau, the United States population was 323.4 million people. One of the contributing factors to the high incarceration rates was the 1994 Violent Crime and Law Enforcement Act, the largest bill of its kind in U.S. history. The act featured a 3-strike mandatory life sentencing and also had $6.1 billion built in for preventative measures. The issue being that these funds were spent mostly on punitive measures rather than rehabilitation. Minority communities were most negatively affected by this in the years following. In the years following the signing of the bill into the U.S. prison population has more than doubled many incarcerated for violent, nonviolent drug offenses. Reforms to the United States prison system has been long overdue, and the First Step Act signed into the law by President Trump in December 2018 is a welcome start.
Thank you. I want to now toss it to the college Democrats for them to introduce themselves and give their opening statements.
My name is Jake Burdett.
My name is Chris Madden.
And my name is Michael Goldsmith. The U.S. justice system has been grossly weaponized over the years, not to protect society from the most dangerous of individuals, but instead to target certain communities to take their voting rights away and to profit off the free labor of prisoners. And this isn't just speculation. During the Nixon administration, who was one of the architects of the war on drugs, he had a top aide who, after getting out of the administration, said, "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to either be against the war or to be black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and the blacks with heroin, we then could criminalize both of them heavily, and we could disrupt those communities." One of the main drivers of the U.S. justice system has become to intimidate and brutally punish poor people for minor offenses, such as drug crimes, while the rich and powerful can get away with almost anything, such as the 2007 subprime mortgage crisis. The U.S. has the highest percentage of its citizens incarcerated compared to any country in the world, as the Republicans have said. Yet we point fingers at other countries as authoritarian, such as Russia, where we have a higher criminal incarceration rate. In addition to that, the U.S. has never cared about the results of their justice approach either, as our recidivism rates are very high. Other countries with much more rehabilitative approaches have proven to produce much lower recidivism rates, and harsh punishments like the death penalty and solitary confinement are not only cruel and unusual, which means they are unconstitutional, but they're also ineffective at deterring crimes.
Thank you. So now I want to ask the Democrat side. I noticed that you had mentioned the war on drugs. Obviously, the war on drugs today gets a ton of hate and criticism, but I wanted to ask you, do you guys see any benefits or any positivities in the war on drugs that was raised?
Take it.
Yeah, no, I do not see any benefits with the war on drugs. The war on drugs, as Michael said in the opening statement, the intent in the first place was to criminalize lifestyles of minority and liberal communities so that they would have an excuse to lock them up and take their voting rights away. Even before that, because Nixon wasn't until like the mid-20th century, but we did have some war on drugs type policies even before then. But it's always been ineffective, and we have the example of the prohibition on alcohol in the 1920s. Whether you make something legal or illegal, it doesn't change the demand for it. People are going to find a way to get a hold of that product. So if you make it illegal, they're going to do it on the black market, and that is, you've just given organized crime and gangs a monopoly on the black market to profit and gain power. That's exactly what happened with the mafia during Prohibition with alcohol, and that's how they rose to power. That's what we're seeing now with cartels and with street gangs with the drug trade. Also, when you legalize drugs, you can regulate drugs and then make them much safer, much less addictive, send people to treatment centers rather than throwing them in a cage and locking it up, which is proven to be not effective. And this isn't even all theoretical. One, we had the example of prohibition in the U.S., but in the year 2000, Portugal decriminalized all drugs, and they immediately saw HIV infection rates decrease. You saw violent crimes decrease. All of the social ills associated with drugs went away as soon as you decriminalize them. So the solution is not to run further in the direction of criminalization, which is proven to not decrease drug rates. In fact, drug rates have increased since the war on drugs. But to take a page out of Portugal's book and look towards decriminalization, and also it would drastically cut down on our prison population. About 40% of our prisoners are in there for nonviolent drug offenses. They've had their lives ruined, and we waste billions of taxpayer money keeping them locked up when they don't need to be locked up.
Thank you, Jake. I want to toss a similar question to the Republicans. I know you mentioned the war on drugs. Does your side see any benefits within the war on drugs? And what do you feel the motive was in starting it?
Well, with the war on drugs, especially with the 1994 Violent Crime and Law Enforcement Act, it was meant to, in theory, curb the crack cocaine epidemic that was occurring and mostly affecting African American communities. Ironically, it posed more of a detriment to African American communities as they ended up being incarcerated at higher rates due to it. We still have drug problems in the U.S. today, and it's clear that punishing those in possession of the drugs is not going to get them off of the drugs. We can agree on that. The issue is we still need to be able to punish those who are selling these drugs, because you have the opioid epidemic, which is concentrated mostly in the East Coast of the United States, and you have the meth epidemic, which is mostly hit Silicon Valley and the Midwest. The only exception of this being West Virginia, which leads the country in both overdoses for both methamphetamines and heroin. And we need to be able to hit these producers, many of which have relocated to Mexico, where they're able to send it over. And we need to be able to punish the distributors and let them know that they cannot be selling these drugs in our country.
And I agree that we need to do something about the black market drug trade, but locking up drug dealers, that's what we've been doing for decades, and it has not worked. So I don't know why continuing to do something that we've been doing would work in the future. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Well, if we legalized, taxed, and regulated drugs, suddenly it would be official businesses and stores selling a regulated, safer version of the drugs, and then suddenly no one would want to buy drugs on the black market from some sketchy drug dealer that might rob you, that might kill you, that might attack you. Again, to bring it back to prohibition, as soon as alcohol got legalized again, the mafia rapidly declined in power to the point where you don't even hear about them today, and it's because when you give people the choice of buying it through a legitimate regulated business or buying it on the sketchy black market, 9 times out of 10, they're going to choose to buy it through a legitimate business. And until we can make it a legitimate trade, the black market, someone's always going to step up to fill that vacuum and create a monopoly on the black market drug trade.
And if I may add, actually, you don't have to go back to prohibition to see this. This happened in Washington, this happened in Colorado, this happened in Portugal, this happened in Amsterdam when they legalized marijuana. It's even happening in Canada right now. You're noticing that a lot of people that previously were illegal drug users have been steadily buying more drugs from a legitimate source, which of course leads to, as Jake was saying, much healthier outcomes of the drug because it's not tainted, it's been regulated, you don't have nasty stuff in it, so you don't have marijuana that's laced with stuff that'll kill you. But feel free, God.
Yeah, I agree that we should be able to decriminalize some drugs, but you have methamphetamines which do not currently have any sort of medical treatment for it to get somebody off of it, unlike opioids, which we are thankfully able to treat. That's still a major problem that's affecting mainly poorer communities. And we also have fentanyl, which is quite powerful, and do we really need that being sold even from legitimate businesses when it only takes a couple milligrams to kill you?
I can agree with the fentanyl. However, there is one thing that could, with any opioid, actually replace those, and that's kratom. Kratom is currently being looked to be scheduled in Schedule 1, which is currently where marijuana, heroin, and I believe LSD are found, which would mean that you could not get that legally. Currently, you can get it legally, and it's helped a lot of people off of their opioid addictions. I think it's a wonderful product. However, it's not talked about much because, again, it is a substitute for these opioids, which are pretty much often pushed by the very powerful drug lobbies.
So we're unpacking a lot here, and I know my people watching at home, my fellow Americans, we're solution-based. So we have these problems. I'm going to ask you, the College Democrats, what are the solutions?
Well, first thing we need to do is decriminalize the use of drugs, because we need to stop punishing the people who use these drugs because it hasn't been working.
I want to clarify for the fans. For the viewers, are you saying all drugs?
Yes, because it's not working. Like, punishing the people who are using the drugs isn't working. We need to focus on treatment and rehabilitation rather than punishment. Putting someone in jail for shooting up heroin isn't going to help them get off of heroin. Putting them in a rehabilitation center and getting them off of heroin is going to get them to stop doing that and stop doing the practices like that.
Thank you. I want to offer you guys a chance to rebuttal.
I think there should be some drugs, such as marijuana, should be legalized. But the point of heroin and other drugs that need needles to be shouldn't be legalized is the reason that if you look at Washington, for example, there's a huge problem with used needles everywhere in that community. Okay, by allowing these people who are homeless, who have these drug addictions, to go in and take their used needles and bring it back, most of those people aren't doing that. You're leaving these needles that are used and can be dangerous by kids. Like, I saw a documentary one time where there was needles that were found in a baseball field right before a baseball game. You know, coaches literally have to go and search around the entire field to make sure that these kids don't get poked by these needles, who God knows what's on them. So I think that, you know, certain drugs such as marijuana, yes, those should be legalized, but it should be under restrictions such as alcohol is. But by having these drugs that are so harmful to other people, that allowing them to go in and replacing the used needles, that might not work. It might not work. It probably won't work, as you see in Washington. So.
Well, in Washington, they tried to do a needle exchange program to provide clean needles, and that was rejected, and since then it has climbed. But in states where there is a needle exchange, like Georgia, Maryland, and many other states, you see that HIV cases caused by needles have significantly dropped in those areas and help prevent people from spreading diseases through used needles. So providing them with needles will help them not get diseases through them. They're going to still keep on doing the drugs even without the needles.
I hate to cut you guys short, but we have to toss it to our closing statements. I'm going to go ahead and let the Republicans begin with their closing statements.
So yeah, we do agree, like, that I got it.
So we can agree on that many of these issues exist, and we both want to solve them. I think the degrees in which we're willing to go, or the methods we're willing to take, are where we see some sort of split. I agree that we need to invest more in rehabilitation and less punishment for those who are using it, but we also need to punish those who are producing it, because if they are not punished, they will continue to introduce newer generations to these drugs and get them hooked.
Thank you. I'm going to now toss it to the College Democrats for their closing statements.
The justice system in America has been mainly, for the past for the past several decades, has been focused on punishment, punishing these people who have done these crimes. And we've seen that that hasn't worked. Punishing people for crimes isn't what they need. They need to be rehabilitated and put out into society as able to work and able to maintain, able to become a person who doesn't go back to committing crime. And the system we currently have does not have that. It's designed to create violence, to create, to dehumanize prisoners and not treat them as human beings. And treating them like human beings is going to get them to stop committing these crimes and to become functional members of society.
All right, I want to thank both the College Democrats and the College Republican panelists for this section of our debate. We'll take a break now and bring 3 new panelists in to talk about United States foreign policy, and we'll be back in just a minute. Thanks.